The hostage and ceasefire deal that was reportedly struck yesterday between Israel and Hamas negotiators is not expected to be voted on by the Israeli cabinet until Friday at the earliest. The vote on the deal was previously expected today, but the office of the Israeli prime minister said Hamas's equivocation or reneging on part of the agreement has caused them to pull back. So was the Biden administration's announcement of the deal yesterday premature, or might they have known about the potential snags but wanted to squeeze the announcement into President Biden's primetime farewell address last night? Joining me now to discuss this is Dr. A.J. Nolte, the director of the Institute for Israel Studies at Regent University. Dr. Nolte, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tony. As always, it's great to be here.
So give me your take on the deal.
I think it's not great. I think that it's very similar to the deal that was proposed last year in March. Very, very little has changed in the deal, but the facts on the ground have changed significantly in two ways. One that should have gotten the Israelis a better deal, and the other that I think is the driving factor for Netanyahu and why he's considering this. Obviously, the facts on the ground have changed from Hamas's perspective. Their support has been crippled. They are now much more isolated than they were last year when something similar to this deal was initially proposed. But I think one fact that we are underestimating as Americans, and both, the Biden and Trump administrations are claiming a lot of credit for this, but the Israeli population has just been absolutely traumatized by the hostage situation. And an increasingly loud, vocal percentage of that population just wants to see the hostages come home. And I think we can sympathize with that on an emotional level. And so they're wanting a deal, even if it's not in the long-term geopolitical risk, because they are so confident because of their recent military successes that whatever happens in the short term, I think they're perhaps maybe a little overconfident that they can just go back in regardless when Hamas inevitably reneges and pick up right where they left off.
Well, I've had a few conversations with those over in Israel in the last 24 hours to kind of get my sense, those close to the prime minister. And here's my take. How I see this deal is that you're right. I think Biden was trying to get a deal so he could claim something. I mean, it's interesting. This is like the ring. Everybody wants to touch it. They want to say they've solved the issue in the Middle East, and you see Biden trying to do that before he goes out of office. I also think contributing to this pressure that has fallen upon Israel is the incoming Trump administration. When the president said he wants the hostages released before he takes office, that created unnecessary pressure to get a deal, even if it was a bad deal. I mean, let's look at the elements of this deal. 6 weeks to release 33 hostages, and they're not able, the Israelis are not able to identify which of those 33 will be released. They could be actually deceased hostages. But on the other hand, and this is one of the big issues that's putting this thing on hold, is that Hamas gets to pick which terrorists get out of prison.
Israel is absolutely never going to agree to that. And there's very particular reason, and this goes to some internal Palestinian politics. One of the prisoners Hamas once released is a guy named Marwan Barghouti. He's a terrorist, but he was actually affiliated with Fatah. The reason they want to do this is because then they can claim, oh, we got Barghouti out and you, Fatah, couldn't. And how do we get them out? By this horrible attack on October 7th. And so Israel recognizes this would be a huge strategic failure to allow Hamas to claim credit for that. And so that's one of the things that Hamas is pushing for. And of course, Hamas also wants terrorists that will be able to join them in Gaza or cause problems in the West Bank as well. Well,
Yahya Sinwar.
Yes, exactly.
He was a terrorist that was released from prison. And what did he do? He became a leader of Hamas.
Absolutely. And so they're very cognizant of that, and they're hoping for that. Now, if you're somebody who is concerned about Israel's freedom to operate under this deal, let's just always remember that every time there's been a negotiation or a deal in the past, it has been Hamas that has reneged, Hamas that has broken the deal. And so to a certain extent, I think Netanyahu recognizes that reality and recognizes Hamas is going to break the deal. And then he can go back to Trump and say, yeah, see, I told you this was going to happen.
So, but what happens in this period of 6 weeks? Because I also understand why we haven't seen all the particular details. I'm told that this also calls for mass humanitarian assistance during this 6 week period. So what does that do to Hamas?
One of the problems with humanitarian assistance in Gaza and in the West Bank and throughout Palestinian society has always been who determines how that is administered, and if it's administered in a way that plays into the bad actors. And I mean, from UNRWA to the seizure of Hamas food shipments during this most recent hostage, we've always seen humanitarian assistance has not gotten to the people. And I'm very much in support of humanitarian assistance for the Palestinian people if it's going to get to them. But what I'm not in support of is giving Hamas more leverage to bully the civilians, which they've been doing since they came into power in Gaza in 2007.
I mean, and I would think it also gives them the opportunity to regroup. Now they are, I mean, their leadership is pretty much decimated. They've been crushed, but you allow them to regroup. And I think there's some concern that the pressure will build after a 6-week ceasefire that could potentially prohibit Israel from going in and eliminating this threat from Gaza by eliminating Hamas.
I think that's a legitimate concern. I'm not as concerned about that, and here's why. Given past performance and given the ideology of Hamas, they are going to do something provocative that will be directed at Israeli soil. And after 10/7, I think the Israeli population recognizes that Hamas has got to go. I think right now that recognition is just intention for the population, with this desperate desire to just get the hostage situation resolved and get their loved ones home.
Dr. Nolte, we just have about a minute left, but the political pressure. I mean, you have a coalition government there. The prime minister has those to his right that could pull out if he gives in to some of these demands by Hamas.
One of the major figures on the right, Bezalel Smotrich, the last report I had last night was that he was not going to pull out, and he wasn't committing to that. There's another figure, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who might, and so it is very delicate for Netanyahu. But he's been in this business a very long time. He's negotiated these coalitions a very long time, and I think that my money is that he will find a way to survive this, and that Hamas ultimately will end up breaking the deal, and then Israel will hammer them, and that the Trump administration will end up supporting that because their national security team, whatever the envoys may see, the national security team gets that.
Yeah, I do think you're right about Prime Minister Netanyahu. He has more political lives than a cat. I mean, he survives. Dr. Nolte, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.